I believe that one of the most important aspects of what makes the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival unique in this musical world is the simple fact that I'm a composer. There are very few, if any, even uh, organizations, festivals, orchestras, whatever, who are actually programmed by composers. The obvious ones that I know of are Aldeburgh in England, which has a tradition being founded by Benjamin Britten. There was a moment, quite a long moment, where a festival in Italy, Montepulciano, was run by Hans-Werner Henze. And there were times, obviously, when Pierre Boulez was the director of certain orchestras. But right now, it's here and it's me. And the difference is that while instrumentalists are challenged with knowing everything about their instrument and all the music that's been written for their instrument, composers need to study composition, which means all of them, all composers from forever. That's what we need to learn about. That's what we study. And the perspective in programming a festival is very different because I'm looking at the whole history of music and looking at it from the standpoint of a composer, looking at the pieces themselves. What are the iconic pieces of our Western music history, our culture? And what do I do to think about one audience member? That's what I do. I think about if there's one person that's going to come to every concert, as I spoke about, some people actually did, what are they going to hear over the course of not one summer, but let's say five? Over 5 years of 5 summers, if you were to actually come to every single concert, what would you have absorbed in terms of a foundation for listening to and understanding the history of the past 500 years of Western classical music? And so I have a multi-year plan. I have the summer plan, and I execute everything from that standpoint. I do not go from the musicians. I go from the program and then find the best musicians for that program. This also has a little bit of a different aspect in terms of individual programs. There are many ways of structuring a program. And if I look, which I do, at what everybody does, there are some kind of standard things that one does, like all French music or all music from a certain year or period post between the two wars, was something like that. I don't do that. I don't do French. I don't do national anything. I don't do birthdays. I don't do comparing cities at any particular year. I program a concert exactly the way I compose a piece. And what that involves is imagining the audience. When you compose a piece, the whole point is to affect the audience. That's obvious, okay? Simple. But how do you affect an audience? You affect them by imagining their psychological and emotional state when they hear something. And what do I do now? How do I bring them through a piece? There are certain emotions which follow logically, and there are others which don't, both of which can be effective. You can draw a listener into something that seems to be a certain kind of a mood, and then lead them into a different mood and into a different one and excite them and calm them down. And there's a flow. Or you can surprise them and jolt them with something totally unexpected. But these are things that a composer that's what we do. That's how we operate. I do the same thing in a program. I imagine an audience coming into a concert and sitting there, and the first thing that they hear is a particular piece which puts them in a particular mood. It has a particular sonority. My programs, since we have a certain number of available musicians every week, and I do that according to the programs, I can juxtapose sound. So if you hear a piece that's all strings, most likely the next thing you're going to hear is either piano or winds or percussion or something very different. And I structure the concert according to sound, according to the mood of pieces, according to the demands. Some pieces are much more emotionally demanding of an audience. You cannot put 2 or 3 or 4 of those together at the same time because it's exhausting. So you have to structure what you're demanding from the audience in terms of attention and participation with how the flow of a concert goes. The way that works, for me at least, is that there are infinite numbers of variety of how you juxtapose pieces. So, for instance, when I think about my 5-year or 10-year or 3-year span of an imagined person, there are certain pieces which need to be heard every 2 or 3. The Trout Quintet by Schubert is one of the iconic pieces of the chamber music repertoire. It needs to be heard every 2 or 3 years. There are other pieces like that. Then there are pieces which are important, but maybe once every 3 or 4 years. We do those rotations, and we balance them with pieces written by composers who may have been secondary, but wrote one great piece. And so we need to play that piece. Or pieces by great composers who were a little bit less good or perhaps written for a strange combination of instruments and therefore don't get played that often. We bring those out. And then we're very aware of time period. We've got 500 years. That needs to be juxtaposed also in a way which is relatable to the audience, but which provides the variety of these different styles. And then, most importantly, I believe that the only way to understand the history of all of this music is through looking at it from today, meaning living composers, because one of the great vulnerabilities is when we come to the point that we think all of this music was written by dead people, because they all are. but it wasn't. They were all alive. They were all there. They had varying degrees of acceptance and success, sometimes not at all until 100 years later. But the idea of having living composers around and performing pieces by living composers gives us that sense that, yes, these are real people who wrote this. Beethoven was a real person. He was a very difficult person. He would probably not have a good career these days because he didn't get along with people. But it's vital, and so I don't like the idea either of a composer in residence because I want lots of them. And we generally have at least 3 to 5 living composers around during the summer. The musicians are very taken with that because it's a mysterious thing. You know, writing music is a very mysterious thing, and people, even musicians, really don't understand it. They're fascinated by it, but it's mysterious. And when the person is actually there, and you can find some relationship between the personality and the sound of the music, and having them explain it, and being around while people are learning and putting it together, it's crucial. It brings a vibrant, living aspect to what, for the most part, is 500 years of dead people. There are some other ways of making programs. One, which I do often also, is a single composer program. This summer, we have the great single composer program of all time, which is the complete quartets of Bela Bartok in one evening. Let's say afternoon, twilight, and evening, because there are 6 of them. I thought about this quite a lot. I knew that I wanted to program the 6 Bartok quartets because quartets are a very particular and tricky thing for composers. There have always been composers who wrote many quartets. We think back to, Haydn and Beethoven and Schubert and Brahms, although he threw a lot of them out. But they were used in a way which is very particular, and that is kind of workshop. This was where you could advance your sense of the music that you were writing, advance your craft with 4 people and work on it and figure it out, and then apply it to symphonies and apply it to choral works and everything else that you're writing. And over the space of a lifetime, a composer like Beethoven you can actually trace his entire development through the string quartets. This is also true of Bartok, who probably wrote the most significant set of quartets in recent memory. And again, you can follow his compositional development through those quartets. So I wanted to do the cycle of 6 quartets. It clearly was not one concert because that's physically not possible for the quartet or the audience. And so I had thought about 2 concerts, and then I thought, no, the real experience would be somehow to make this a kind of mini marathon and hear all of them in order, in the sequence they were written, and follow this progression. So we have that program with 2 good long intermissions. So we go 2, 2, and 2 for the quartets. And that's a real experience. That's something that an audience does not forget. You remember that for the rest of your life. Uh, in terms of the programming of more challenging pieces in all the concerts, not all, but a lot of them, uh, I don't believe that it's necessary that you like every piece on a program. I believe that it's necessary to hear juxtaposed periods and juxtaposed sounds. I believe that it's stimulating. And I also feel that it's perfectly fine. And I've said this to certain members of our audience, go out, take a walk, come back for the last piece. It doesn't matter. It's an experience. Over the years, it was quite fascinating. In the beginning, the first year, I programmed new pieces on almost every program. None of them were longer than 8 minutes. They were all about 6 to 8 minutes. I got the best people playing that summer to play them, and I gave them way too much rehearsal so that the impact was really there. And the progression over the years in the audience went something like this. The first year it was, well, I guess it's okay as long as he keeps giving us Brahms and Schubert. And then the next year it was, well, that new piece really wasn't that bad. And then the next year it was, that was really fascinating, that new piece. And then the next year it was, I wonder what our new pieces are going to be this year. And more recently, a couple told me an anecdote. They were sitting in the hall, and it was between pieces, and there was a couple next to them, and they heard the woman asked her husband, gee, what is this next piece? I have no idea what this is. And the couple telling me this said that they leaned over and said, oh, you must not be from here. So we've come to that, and basically, I have great respect for the integrity, the curiosity, and the willingness for an audience to expand their knowledge, expand their experience, and be exposed to an ever increasing limit until it's limitless. And that's what our audience has become. And the excitement is always there. It's exciting to be at a concert. It's never dull.